Howdy, this is Tubalcain, and this video is a follow-up to my previous video, which was tips number 147, where I ground the jaws on this chuck. And as I mentioned, this chuck became very contaminated with grinding dust, so this video will be concerned with taking this chuck apart and cleaning it, and I'll explain how to do that and what a scroll chuck is in this video. If you have any interest at all in little steam engines, I built this in one of my previous videos, and I think it's 5 parts, so if you enjoy that type of thing, go back and look at those videos. Now, before I start this, I just wanted to mention there are 3 different kinds of spindles that are commonly on lathes, and the most common that you're going to run into on small lathes is just a threaded spindle where the chuck threads onto the threaded spindle on the lathe. The disadvantage with these is on a larger heavy chuck, it's kind of hard to line it up and get it on there, and also if the chuck is the lathe is reversed, the chuck can spin off, and I have seen that happen in the school shop so often that at one point I had to disable the reversing switch on the lathes because the chucks were flying all over the place. The second kind that is quite popular on larger lathes is like this. This is just a backing plate for what we call the cam lock, or some people call it a short taper because the taper is right here and it's relatively short compared to to the next one I'm going to show you. These come in different sizes. Some of them have 6 pins on them, and again, that's called the cam lock. And the sizes are D1-2, D1-3, and so on. So that's how those are sized. And the kind that we're concerned with right now is called taper key drive, or we often call it a long taper because the taper here is about 2 inches, so it aligns real well and is held onto the lathe with a collar. Now, these last 2 that I mentioned will not spin off, and even heavy chucks can be attached fairly easily if you have some kind of saddle arrangement or a hoist or something, because some of the chucks get very, very, very heavy. This is only a 6-inch chuck, so I'm going to take this chuck apart now and show you how it's built, and I'm going to clean it thoroughly and get the grinding dust out of there while I'm at it. Incidentally, these chucks, the long taper key, come in different sizes as well. This, I believe, is the smallest. It's an L00, and then they go to L0 and L1 and so on as they get larger. So there are different sizes, and that would be proportional to the size of the lathe. When you take these chucks apart for the very first time, they need to be marked such that you assemble them exactly the way you took them apart. And this one's been apart probably many times, but notice that there are center punch marks there and there on the body, because this chuck has 3 pieces here. This is the backing plate, and then this is the main body, and this is how you take it apart. And I've got it marked there, and I circled those so that you would be able to see them better here on the camera. These are called scroll chucks because there's a scroll inside there that allows all 3 jaws to move in and out with one keyhole here. Actually, there's 3 keyholes on here. They do make a 4-jaw scroll chuck as well, as opposed to 4-jaw independent chucks. This is a Bernard made in England. The first thing I'll do is take the jaws out, and remember the jaws are numbered, so here's slot number 3, and then the jaw is marked number 3. And also remember that the jaws are not interchangeable between different chucks, and many of them have serial numbers on them. And this again is 2-piece jaws with that is, there's the jaw and the jaw caps that are held on by these cap screws. So now I'll take the jaws out, which you've all seen done. I'll do that off camera. Just back the screw out here until the jaws come out. That way I can clean them. These are the jaws that were just ground in the previous video and greatly contaminated with grinding dust. I wish I had a parts washer. I would just put them in there and wash them. But these will be cleaned thoroughly with brake cleaner outdoors. Now you can see the scroll here. And the next thing I'm going to do for taking this apart is to remove these 3 cap screws. And I've already loosened those while this was still mounted on the lathe because they were so tight it would be a struggle to try to get them loose here on the bench with nothing to hold the chuck down, because I wouldn't put this in a vise even if I had a vise large enough to hold it. So these 3 cap screws will be taken out and set off to the side, and then the chuck will separate here at this point. At this point, using a lead hammer, I don't even like to use a brass hammer. I've been tapping it in order to get it apart, and it is starting to separate right here, as you can see. It was a pretty tight fit, but now it's coming apart. You see, that was such a tight fit, there isn't any swarf in there, and there's still plenty of oil in there from the last time it was taken apart. From the construction of these, I think you can begin to see why these chucks are so expensive. Now from the back side here, you see the bevel gears, and there's a separate one for each keyhole here. Some cheaper chucks only have 1 gear here. That helps them get the price down a little bit. I don't believe I'm going to take these out, but you can see there's a screw here that allows you to remove the gear. You know what, old Tubalcain just changed his mind. I am going to remove the gears here, and I took the screw out. And be sure and use brass when you as a punch, and that will come right out, I think. That's what that looks like, and now I'll take the other 2 out off camera. And these screws came out real easily. They weren't tight because everything's oiled, and this is sealed pretty well because there is no dirt or grit back in here, or chips. I have all 3 of the little gears out, and now the gear scroll assembly should pop out of there, or possibly has to be driven, but I'm just going to bang this a little bit on the wood. Yeah, and it came right out. There's the scroll. Now apparently on this particular chuck, this is a press fit here, because this doesn't seem to come apart at this joint, and I don't think I need to anyway, because I can just clean everything real thoroughly now. Now looking at the scroll, this is called a scroll, and that's why it's sometimes called a scroll chuck. Notice that it's nothing more than a thread, really, that's like a spiral. And the jaws, of course, fit into that. Now a lot of grit got into this, but even if you're not grinding, eventually chips work their way in there, and that's what causes binding when it's real difficult to move the chuck jaws, and that's when it ought to come apart and be cleaned. And that should actually be serviced regularly, but generally that's something that is a chore and people do not do. Also, I think this helps you understand now why the jaws are numbered, because they are going to start in different positions because of the scroll. So we got jaws 1, 2, and 3 that go into slots 1, 2, and 3. You can imagine that this is quite an expensive part to manufacture. The scroll wears, and that's also part of the problem sometimes in the run out of the chuck. And there's nothing that can be done about that, but this might also help you understand why I needed to load the chuck jaws when I did the grinding in the previous video. Now I'm going to proceed to clean everything hospital clean. And I'll do that off camera. It'd be very nice if I had a pan or something to do this in. But any kind of good thinner, you know, whether it be brake cleaner or lacquer thinner or heavens knows you don't want to use gasoline. Certainly if it's any dangerous thinner that you're using, do it outside. But stick with safe thinners such as mineral spirits or paint thinner. It's 20 minutes later and I have cleaned everything thoroughly and dried it off. Wiped it with clean Bounty towels, no other brand will do. It's better than using rags because you know the condition of the clean towels. And I spent a particularly large amount of time on the scroll, and I cleaned the scroll thoroughly with this is some kind of fiber brush. It isn't, but do not use steel. Brass is okay, or of course your wife's toothbrush will work too. But clean it real well, and now we're ready to start reassembly, and everything will be very lightly oiled with 20 weight as you reassemble it. Never assemble anything dry, but use a minimum amount of oil, or ultimately the extra oil will spin out and end up on your left shoulder. Again, just a little bit of oil because that'll spread around. And I like to put a little bit here, and then I like to wipe it in with my hands. Same thing here. I've already done that. And then I will drop the scroll into place. Check for burrs before you reassemble it, and if anybody did any prying on this with a screwdriver or whatever to get it apart, you probably got some little burrs. So take a nice sharp flat file and run it on all these flat surfaces so that there is absolutely no burrs. Also, this is sharp in some places here from original manufacture, so watch it, you don't cut yourself. And that's all been lightly oiled, and the scroll, and it goes this way, not that way, into place. Down she goes. I've got the gears in place, and I double checked it with my chuck key that they will turn freely. And now the screws need to go in there. They're a combination actually of a pin and a threaded screw. Go in there, and I'm going to use just a little bit of this extreme pressure lubricant here on the gear, because this side here seems to be sealed pretty well so that the oil will not get slung out at me, the operator, nor does the grit and swarf get inside of the body of the chuck. Now, a white grease or some other kind of grease could also be used in there, and this is all free and lubricated, and the screws are tight, and this is the location marker, the index mark, and the corresponding one right here, and I've already oiled this lightly, and this is actually where it's going to get located here, where you see this step here. Like that, and I'm lining it up with the screws, which they're going to go in from the other side, but before I tap that into place, I want to make sure that those screws are started, and I got the correct location here in this direction, and then I will tap it down or pull it down with the bolts. The threads are started with the 3 cap screws, and at this point I can tap it till it starts to close, and I'll pull it back up with the cap screws, and I'm going to put it on the lathe and do the final tightening and install the jaws while it's on the lathe spindle, because it just makes it a little bit easier to handle rather than rolling around like it is right now. Now I will mount it on the spindle here for the last step, and make sure that you clean everything thoroughly with a Bounty towel, and then 2 drops of oil only. This is again what we call the L00 spindle, or long taper, or taper key, and clean out the inside of the chuck, although that's already been done. But using your bare hands you can really feel if there's any grit, and protect your lathe bed with a board, and the collar can be brought up, and then I tighten it with my spanner wrench. And this is how I do the final tightening of the cap screws, because the thing can't get away on me now. It's held rigidly, almost like it's in a vise. I am now ready to install the jaws, and remember there are numbers on them. That's number 3, and number 1 will be the first one to go in, and that's number 2. And we need a little oil in here, but not much, because again, remember that oil will get slung out at high speeds. Now when you go to put these in, the number 1 is put in as the end of the scroll. Now that you know what the scroll is, comes around right there. You can put a little bit of oil here also if you want, but bring that down, rotate the chuck, and you will feel it advance. I know that one is in place, and as I come around I'll watch the end of the scroll right here. There it is, and I back it off, and number 2 jaw goes into place. And I can see that is engaged. Watch for the scroll to come around, and the number 3 jaw is put into place, and they will all move in together and at the same time and close together if you have done that all correctly. And there I am, and the job is done, and that took over an hour, so that's why people tend to not do this, because it's not a pleasant job, but it needs to be done from time to time, because you're going to feel that the chips and the swarf in the scroll when it is difficult to move the jaws in and out when you turn the chuck key. So that's something you will want to do, but try to do it ahead of time when you're doing lathe maintenance, rather than in the middle of a job when it becomes most frustrating. Hope this was helpful. This is Tubalcain saying so long for now.